Ladies, gentlemen, and adventurers of all ages, when it comes to Baldurs Gate 3, there's always a new reason to play, honestly. Whether it be a lovely new patch coming along, or maybe you just have the itch to try a new playstyle that you never have before. There are just always things that you have yet to experience within this game, so today we are going to talk about a number of these in a somewhat specified way, which is, of course, character builds, with the goal being 5 builds or playstyles you are either unlikely to have tried in the past, or they are classic playstyles that have just been optimized in further ways over the now 9 months since release, and either way, regardless, they're going to be interesting and also very powerful. Starting off with something new then, but also something that might be a bit hard to quantify as a build specifically, more of a just really neat trick that you can sort of use in the back pocket of honestly most builds, at least ones that have strength in them, and this is just a fun combo that lets you instantly kill any character that isn't hostile on sight. How, you ask? Well, throwing stuff at them. If you throw things that aren't weapons, they don't do any damage and don't make the NPC angry at you. And you may be wondering what that actually does, but hold on, because there's also the illithid power called Ability Drain. This makes it so once per turn on an attack roll, you lower your opponent's strength, except outside of combat, there's no actual stopping this effect from applying it on repeat, and there is also some sort of weird interaction with this that makes it not decrease stacks at all ever outside of combat, which means if you have Ability Drain and constantly throw non-aggressive items at an NPC, you can continually and consistently lower their strength, which by itself is a neat trick, sure, but we're not done yet, because then we have a unique part of a specific summon, the Shadow Wraith. You get this from the Shadow Lantern item, which is a unique reward in Act 2 for bringing Gale to the secret chamber within Balthazar's bedroom in Moonrise Tower. Then you get Gale to finish the ritual that you find inside of here. The Shadow Wraith that you can summon has the ability Strength Drain, which lowers the target strength by 3, but also importantly, this can cause strength to go below 0, which not many things can, and that causes atrophy, which will literally instantly kill anything in the game. So you throw things at them non-hostily to lower the strength to 1, get the Shadow Wraith to drain once, and then bam, enemy's dead. Simple as that. Then moving on, let's talk about a bit more of a proper build, and this is a fun one. Credit to Fardas7274 for the base concept, but also why on earth would you make me say that name? Goddamn! And this build is a mixed wizard barbarian, basically trying to push against established and accepted rules that these two things should not be mixed, and creating a strange bastardized build that is almost like an eldritch knight, but has a few less options, sure, but also winds up being a fair bit tankier just because of how it all functions together. So first things first, why do these two classes normally not work? Barbarians are all about their rage, and rage makes you unable to concentrate on spells and cast most magic that isn't melee, of course, meaning that it immediately cuts you off of the vast majority of a wizard's toolkit. So what we do here is simply build around the things that do work, and surprisingly it is quite effective. As far as putting it together, then you want to start off with 3 levels of barbarian to get to your subclass. For starting stats, you go hard into strength and constitution, leaning a bit towards strength, and then I would recommend Wild Heart subclass with the Bare Heart for further mitigation when raging to make you even tankier. Then you want 1 level of Sorcerer after that, Draconic Bloodline White specifically for Cold Dragon. Specifically, this gives you Armor of Agathis, an extremely strong defensive spell that works extremely well if we can draw attention of enemies, as it also deals retaliation damage when hit, and we can scale this to just be our best use of our highest spell slot. We then grab level 4 Barbarian and the Sentinel feat, specifically because at higher difficulty AI will just avoid you if your defense is too strong, so we use this to sort of incentivize the enemy, leaving your party alone and actually attacking you, while also letting you run in and use your face as an attack of opportunity, proccing Machine as an alternative use of this too. Level 5 Barbarian for bonus attack, and then our last 6 levels go into Wizard, specifically Abjuration Wizard, to give us further damage mitigation on every incoming hit of damage, as well as a growing barrier as we cast, and then just access to higher spell levels to cast Armor of Agathis at for higher potency. You also get Shield through this too, which lets you use your reaction to both give yourself AC and build up some of your arcane warding. You can also get Counterspell further down the line in this too for a powerful bonus defensive tool that again will help build up your Abjuration protection. All spells past that are just completely personal choice. Just remember that Abjuration is your strength for spells, so you'd rather save your spell slots for the already mentioned ones generally anyways. As far as equipment then, there is the Warped Headband of Intellect that you can get in Act 1 for forced 17 int, which does allow you to select more spells as a wizard if you want the variety that offers, but for the most part the prime synergies of this build come from the class interactions themselves, so you can sort of build your weapon and equipment around this as you please, either leaning more towards damage or more towards defense, either way. Then next up we actually have a sort of variation of the last one that I think is quite fun, where the previous one was a ridiculously turtley tank build of unmatched defense. This uses some similar ideas but to create something a lot more damaging while still having incredible defense, for if you want, a much faster and riskier playstyle that also has its own reward in massive damage numbers, which is going to start similarly 3 levels of Barbarian, but this time we are taking the Berserker subclass for the Frenzied Rage and the bonus attack that gives us. Then we take 2 levels of Paladin, specifically Oath of Vengeance. This gets you Divine Smite, which you can cast for massive bonus damage using your spell slots without concentration while raging, and we also get Inquisitor's Might, your channel Oath bonus action to give bonus damage per hit and Daze Chance too. Then we again take level 4 Barbarian and the Sentinel feat, as we are still throwing ourselves into the mix with a ton of mitigation. Level 5 Barbarian for the bonus attack once more, which is what brings us to 3 attacks per turn while raging, and then the final 5 levels into Abjuration Wizard in a similar way to the last build. The core differences up to this point really are that you lose Armor of Agathis, which is already a pretty big hit defensively, honestly, but you do gain Divine Smite, and we all know what smites can do in the right hands. On top of this though, you also lose 4th level spell casting, which is a secondary consideration, but in return you can use a weapon like the Skin Burster, which I personally think is perfect for this version of the build especially, and this gives you 2 turns of Force Conduit each time you do melee damage with your weapon, 3 attacks per turn while raging after 5th level Barbarian in this, and that's 6 turns of Force Conduit gained per turn. Force Conduit being an effect that reduces all bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing damage by 1 per turn remaining, as well as applying some retaliation damage on hit if you are at 5 turns or more. 6 turns gained per turn is 6 damage reduction, scaling up every single turn that passes that you get consecutive hits on too, making this build extremely tanky while still having the smites on hand too. On the note of smites, let's talk about our next build, which is going to be based around Banishing Smite, which has the potential to be the highest singular hit of melee weapon damage in the game, and specifically additional bar 8572 on Reddit has been pushing this to its limit, reaching nearly 1500 in a single attack just a few days ago. How did he do this, you may be asking, and the answer is with a healthy mix of College of Swords Bard and Oath of Vengeance Paladin, as well as a number of specific items and some short-term buffs too. So we're going to sort of deconstruct this into a more manageable and more usable general use build, rather than just the singular massive meme hit for those who like the sound of it. First things first, half orc for savage attacks is extremely good for this, but far from a requirement unless you are aiming for that singular massive hit. Then you want to grab just straight up 6 levels of Bard to start off with in your leveling journey, with a heavy focus on charisma and strength within your stats. Later in the game though, if you have enough potions of Hell Giant Strength and Cloud Giant Strength, you can sort of dump out of strength into other stats here too, but those are the main important ones for this, and that's important to be aware of. Make sure that you go College of Swords for your Bard, and you want Dual Wielding as your fighting style for more damage dice per attack. Level 4, you want to take Great Weapon Master as your feat, mostly for the bonus damage for attack roll penalty, but also the damage bonus on crit or kill are quite good for this too for general use. Then you hit 6th level for a bonus attack per turn, and past that we grab 2 ranks in Oath of Vengeance Paladin, specifically for Divine Smite as an option as we progress through this section of the game, as well as Inquisitor's Might for your channel Oath ability as a bonus action for bonus radiant damage that can trigger gear that we'll talk about later on. Then you want to just sort of dump the rest of your levels straight into Bard, so at the end you are 10 Swords Bard, 2 Vengeance Paladin, and you want to take your second feat option and get Savage Attacker as well for just more consistent damage rolls on every dice that you roll, and make sure along the way that you grab both Hold Person and Hold Monster for guaranteed crits on priority targets to really enable even more nasty combos with this setup. And then the most important choice that you make here is with your final level, where you can use magical secrets to pick up Banishing Smite, which even Paladins cannot use in Baldur's Gate 3 because of how the spellcasting system works in general. And once you have this, you essentially become the strongest version of a Smite Paladin currently around, while having very few levels in Paladin at all, at least, for as long as you have this spell slot to cast the massive Whomper of a Smite. Then moving on to your gear then, if you just want general power, you should use classically strong combos, especially for multiple damage dice. Things like the Callous Glow Ring is a really big one. Then of course, if you get far enough in and still want to continue improving this build, the legendary short sword from Orin in Act 3 is also quite amazing for this. But everything else I could recommend specifically is more just to boost the memey one-turn nature of this by building around crits without high crit chance. That to say, it works incredibly well without that if you like the sound of just having a massive set of smites to essentially turn a bard into being more paladin than paladins are. And this version of it is the most general use one that will be consistent throughout multiple combats between rests. Then for our final build today, we're going to revisit a concept that we did ages ago, which was a sort of infinite stealth build, with the idea being combining Assassin, which does tons of damage reliant on stealth-based conditions, with the idea of stealth so potent that it stays active even after you attack enemies, which lets you just stay permanently hidden and permanently getting these assassin bonuses too. The original version version of this build that we talked about was just a few weeks after release, and since then it's been a long time and there's been a number of changes to the game. We've learned about a number of items we didn't even know about at the time, and honestly we've just gotten better at doing this stuff over time too. So let's talk about how to revitalize this for an even more powerful infinite stealth build for the modern game, the sort of months ahead game that we have now. First up, ideally you will be Deep Gnome or Halfling as your race to start with, as this just gives you advantage on stealth checks as a base, and that makes the whole thing function a fair bit smoother. Then you'll be starting by getting rogue levels, and in your starter stats you want high dex with high charisma as your second focus, but it's worth noting that this will change pretty early on, as you can get the gloves of dexterity late in Act 1 at the Githyanki Kresh, which set your dex to 18, and that should be enough to do the job with everything else we have stacked, especially if you also work out the ways to get your stealth check advantages, so you can then dump your dex stat out for high charisma and constitution as your main focuses. Of course, we are going to be taking assassin as our rogue subclass, it just perfectly lines up with our goals here. Initiative gives us bonus damage first turn, ambush gives us guaranteed crits constantly, and alacrity gives us a bonus attack for starting combat turn from stealth essentially, which is pretty solid in itself. At level 4, you initially probably want to take defensive duelist as a feat for extra defense using your reaction each turn, but once you reach the point of full stealth, defense becomes just sort of a non-issue, and you can then swap this out for more charisma and thus more damage. Then we take level 5 for the uncanny dodge, which is just straight up half damage whenever you get hit, and after that we move to warlock for our remaining 7 levels essentially. For the most part, the classic strong spells are still very strong in this, and having a well-built eldritch blast is always useful too, but that's not just really the main focus here. So the thing that you specifically want to pay attention to and hit on your way through these levels is Pact of the Blade at level 3 warlock, and this allows you to make your weapon scale with your spellcasting modifier, which reward us for an investment in charisma and our melee damage. And then at level 4 we can get our second ability score improvement to max out charisma properly. Level 5 warlock gets us an extra attack every turn, which is lovely. Then level 6 with the Archfey subclass gets us our Misty Escape as a sort of backup in case a stealth check ever fails, which puts you back to being invisible if you then take damage. But this also makes you able to sustain a greater stealth build early on. Then our final level lets us grab greater invincibility, which lets you turn perfectly invisible for 10 turns, not breaking on any attacks that you do as long as you can pass stealth checks, which we are built to do in this build. If you don't mind using party members as well, you can actually accomplish this much earlier by having a pure spellcaster in your party around just to cast greater invisibility on you, but you can become fully self-sufficient with it at level 12, which is lovely too. As for items, there are 2 or 3 real proper required ones for this, which are the gloves of dexterity I mentioned earlier. Then the next one sort of depends. If you went for Deep Gnome or Halfling, you don't really need this, but otherwise I would heavily recommend the elegant studded leather chest for bonus to initiative, for more effects from our assassin bonuses too, as well as advantage on stealth and the ability to cast shield, which is nice too, defensively speaking. Finally, you want the duelist prerogative sword. This is the sort of endgame cap off to the build that makes everything just sort of truly sing, giving you the bonus reactions and bonus damage die to spend those reactions on, which scale with your crits and such, just making absolutely mammoth hits from stealth. Then your other slots are just sort of much more standard. That just about does it for today then, everyone. Just another collection of 5 particularly powerful but also fun or fresh, new in general, lesser played, or just freshly updated classic builds for Baldurs Gate 3. I hope you've enjoyed this, and of course let us know if you'd like more of this type of thing down in the comments below. Like if you liked the video, subscribe to the notification bell for more, and most importantly, ladies and gentlemen, until next time, stay sweet.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.